And that's when I started to see the grace. I started to see through the mystical where God existed and really make sense out of something that was not explainable in my mind, but only explainable through the veils lifting and seeing that the two most profound moments, I could say, that were equally timeless and filled with light were birth and death.
You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. If you want to take charge of your health and life, and go deeper with your soul journey so you can live from a place of purpose, this is the show for you. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Feed Your Wild podcast. I cannot stop smiling because I'm just so excited that you are here and that today we are talking to Susan Lipshutz, a dear friend of mine and mentor who has brought so much light and wisdom to not only my life, but to so many others. Susan Lipshutz is a sacred feminine activist with more than 30 years of experience teaching and practicing integrative psychotherapy. Devoted to building strong communities that reawaken and integrate the divine feminine into daily life, Susan combines the ancient wisdom of our grandmothers with her own powerful teachings attuned to the complexities of modern life. In 1999, Susan founded Everyday Medicine Woman, offering workshops, meditation courses, and retreats around the world. The name really reinforces the core ideas of how basic or everyday our attention to mind, body, spirit can be, and how there is innate healing medicine within each of us. With her unique blend of Western medicine, indigenous traditions, feminist principles, and contemporary sensibilities, Susan has emerged as a guide and bridge for these transformative times. I'm so excited to bring Susan onto the show and to share her wisdom with you. I first met Susan at a time where there was a lot of darkness and challenges for myself and for my mom, who was battling cancer at the time. And eventually I got to sit in with her 13 Moons Women's Circles, which was programming that integrated earth-honoring principles, myth, storytelling, and natural cycles with a woman's sacred journey in a community format in person. And I cannot tell you how healing and incredible that experience was for myself, and seeing that in other women and the power of circle and community for our journey together. In this episode, Susan shares her origin story, how she came into this work and her experience of spiritual awakening, her own birthing story and how that cracked her open, and provides so many pearls of wisdom and practices and tools that we can begin to incorporate into our lives to help us in these modern times and connect us back into the sacredness of the mundane, of our primal bodies and our inner medicine. In a sense, I feel that my intention with Feed Your Wild is to create a virtual circle, one where we each share each other's medicine, where stories from heart-centered, courageous people weave love and healing into the fabric of our own life experiences, and that we each can walk away feeling more nourished and empowered each time. So with that, welcome. I am so glad you're on this journey with me, and let's get to the show. Susan, I am so grateful and thrilled to have you on today, our inaugural interview of the Feed Your Wild podcast. I'm so excited. You are seeing the launch of our ship into Mama Sea. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, I'm a huge fan of yours and really honored to have this conversation with you. So I'm here. And of course, that's no pressure being the inaugural conversation here, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, absolutely no pressure. It's all perfect. You have been a pioneer in the holistic wellness and personal development space, fusing in-depth psychotherapy with indigenous principles and evolutionary tools such as astrology and Akashic guidance for more than 30 years. And I find it so fascinating that it really feels like today these worlds are fusing in a bigger way, online and social media and a lot of circles. So there's so much that I want to dive into today, but I want to start off by sharing your origin story. How did you get to where you are today? What was that first seed? What did that look like?
Thanks. I'm with you. There are just, yourself included, there are so many really beautiful, equal pioneers to what's happening in the space that we're all in that is almost germinating the origin seeds into a beautiful orchard. And it's really quite extraordinary to be a part of and to witness and to just regard in terms of what it's something, kind of like when you're building something and it's one little space and then you return. I kind of felt that way when I was, so maybe this is my origin story I'm inadvertently backing up into. But one of the pieces that I believe looking back was something that initiated my consciousness into something that then grew later was my senior year of high school. For lots of other reasons, I ended up doing my senior year of high school at an alternative boarding school, which was in Sedona, Arizona, before Sedona was known to be, Vortex, New Age, Sedona. And the Red Rocks absolutely called me. And I think, in some ways we look esoterically in terms of guides. And it's like, girl, we can't take a risk that you're not going to start to, get an awakening on what the natural universal space, you need to be activated in that way. And I really do believe that it was something that I look back and say was, facilitated something that was really meaningful for me in terms of being taken out of my everyday environment and into a space that had so much natural beauty and so much that inspired a sense of the world that was out there and being exposed in very small, meaningful ways with people who lived close to the land and what their love for the land and their value for a sense of being part of something that was nature, spirit, human, and what it really meant to be in that cycle and see it from that point of view. And so several experiences that I had that way, I think, were part of this grooming that started to then work for me or help inspire me or help guide me along the way as I continued with, my own going to college and graduate school and all those things. I definitely had a trajectory being a good Capricorn on establishing a business and being a professional and wanting to help people. And at the same time, I had in my personal life interest in things that were more, we might consider, more metaphysical or esoteric, like having cards, your tarot cards read and palm read and astrology and all those things that were interesting to me. And I say interesting because I showed up to them with, what do you want to say to me? And I can decide what that means. And then I can go back to my world. I wasn't engaged in any way. I didn't have a spiritual practice. I didn't even regard myself as spiritual in any way. But what was happening is I was very deeply trying to understand how to bring more value to people that I was seeing. And again, there were many things that were happening and exploding as it related to new forms of trauma understanding. I was an early feminist, and so there was an understanding of this boon around how to bring feminism into the intimate space of practice. I was really reacting to some of the models that were given to us that felt very limiting to me around how I could be a human being in that space and really offer some more faith to people that had endured a great deal of trauma. So in some ways, the door was opening around words that I didn't even think about: faith, trust. How do you steward and guide someone to that space of believing in a world that hurt you? So as I was going through all those things and having these deep questions and having these mystical experiences that I didn't, in fact, believe to be so, that were layering in my life, I think what really started to happen is I moved more deeply into the mundane of my life cycle, and that's where it popped. And that's why I'm so dedicated to, no matter what we learn and however we develop our intellect and, however many sort of credentials we have, that those are all literally academic. They're sitting on our walls, they're in our minds. But unless something that we meaningfully open up to having a sense of how to digest those and integrate those with something that we can hold them in, that actualizes the context of the understanding, we're separated from them, whether we're clinicians or whether we're, individuals looking for help, right? So I think it was one of those things. And for me, it was not being interested in life cycle issues like getting married and having kids, those being a feminist, that was, the inheritance of almost like the prison of family as opposed to the wonderment. But I stumbled into it anyway. I got really guided into, again, creating a space for myself, and kind of woke up one day hearing that I should have a child. And no one could have been more surprised than me. But I looked back again and it was absolute guidance, and followed it to my own surprise. And so when I had my first daughter, the experience of heart opening, of falling in love, I ended up having a natural childbirth, which was not that common 32 years ago as it was now, but it happened. And out of that, I was already studying with a spiritual teacher at the time, at that point, not knowing as such, getting a lot of spiritual readings and starting to learn about chakras and that sort of thing, not applying it in any way, just to understand myself a little bit more. But after I had the birth, everything just cracked open. My abilities started to really surprise me at what was happening inside my office space and outside, seeing, hearing, being guided. Transformational healing opportunities were happening in the work that, again, I almost felt like I was getting out of the way and watching happen. And it was shocking and exciting and frightening all at the same time. And so what was happening simultaneously was this call into my primal body, this experience of the body and the heart, and this ancient sort of understanding that came to me that was so, again, surprising, because it was something that was shown to me in my family. There was a strong matriarch through one of my grandmothers. Women were very strong in certain kinds of ways in my family, but we were not a kind of family that really shared natural traditions or spoke, in that way. There were cultural traditions that were extremely meaningful, but in terms of this understanding of the body being sacred, understanding of women having intrinsic medicine, of what the mystery was inside of us, I had virtually no clue about that. It was more how to hide all of that so that you could be out in the world, right? Not show that you were having your cycle, or that, having a new baby would make you less valuable to your clinical or workspace, proving it that you could make it, which I saw very much. I also worked with medical residents, and I saw how much those women were killing themselves to not lose their stride, to be in their residencies, to be in their offices and still have babies and, do all those things. So we were all kind of trying to be elegant in the mess of our lives. But it was more what I was awakening for me, was really this extreme beauty, this powerful experience of what it really meant to go through birth, and what it really meant to start to feed my baby myself, and all of these kinds of things. And so I was having this whole other educational experience into this intuitive awakening that was also a spiritual awakening, because it was so beautiful to me. And beauty was not how something looked, but how it felt deep in my heart space. So I was really having this profound rite of passage awakening that was all about the most mundane to our experience. And that's when the magic really started to happen, and really, in some ways, the bigger questions and the pain. And so during that time, was a couple of years later, I had my second daughter, and then my mother passed away 6 months after that. And that was really sort of the descent. One was an ascension, and then the other, not to say it was easy, but it was like, everything was opening up for me, a lot of worlds, and then crashing into this space of unexpected loss, and really having to confront the darkness, having to confront not believing in God, having to confront this, what I felt a very unfair experience and tragedy in the middle of all this grace. And that's when I started to see the grace. I started to see through the mystical where God existed, and really make sense out of something that was not explainable in my mind, but only explainable through the veils lifting, and seeing that the two most profound moments, I could say, that were equally timeless and filled with light were birth and death. So this was my teacher, was my life, and was the feminine, and starting to take over this version of, wait, you're next in line. You are holding that door open around the grace of the feminine. And so, just to not go on and on, but that's really what guided me and was the force. And what had happened was everything that I created that was a persona that I really thought, that I mastered around what I wanted to look like to move through the world with my, then I didn't, I was still getting my astrology read, but I didn't get the true impact of a Saturn return. That's when I had my first daughter. Everything I created by the time all of this happened, it broke away. I shed it like a serpent shed its skin. So everything I masterfully, created to move out in the world was now kind of suffocating me, including the marriage that I had moved into. And so it was not an easy time. It was like, trust yourself over and over and over in my practice. So that was the other thing, is I felt compelled to integrate in what I was learning responsibly and thoughtfully. But it was kind of thing of saying, how do I explain to people that some of the guidance I was getting was not through my professional supervision, but was also from my spiritual guides or their spiritual guides? It was kind of a very confusing time. But I had two choices. I could either live outside of it or I could go inside of it. And I think that's where the pioneering really happened, in integrating the best I could and going underground in some ways and finding new teachers and all those things. And then I really surrendered into being a spiritual student. Like, where was I going to look for that? And so I'll do the cliff notes of that. But what ended up happening was I sort of did a Woody Allen run of who's my teacher, trying everything. And it was really kind of funny and bizarre and great. But what ended up happening was I was looking for something that was a reflection for me in my community of women. And I really respect and I revere Buddhism and trainings of many traditions, but I couldn't see the feminine in there and I couldn't see family in there. And it was a certain kind of androgyny and a certain kind of out of that I really felt compelled into learning about. And when I ultimately ended up doing my deep work with the Americas and the earth honoring teachings, it was because there was a reverence for the feminine as being unique and the mystery of the feminine and the power of such, and what it meant to all the spaces that we felt were limiting for us as Western women around making food and caring for family and understanding our bodies and our moon time. I didn't even know what that meant. That was our menstrual cycle, but it was connecting us with a cyclical honoring of our lives and where that power lied, and rather than the stationary sun and trying to replicate the masculine. That is where I felt I wept with this notion of, oh my God, there was an inclusive, multifaceted cycle of intergenerational and timelessness and ancient recovery and, all those things that just felt like there was so much to learn and grow and so much to find within myself that made my journey sacred and inclusive and woven into something that had everything I needed. And so I relaxed into that. And that's when it was just beginning, and then layered and layered and layered. And so as I found over time, it was in working with the indigenous practices and teachers in the most thoughtful way, where I didn't feel there was this, appropriation as best I could, but a real way that I could be welcomed in and could be thoughtfully, respectfully integrate all of these different facets. And then bring them into different models, like shifting group therapies into women's medicine circles, where we put them through the mandala of a witnessing, of everyone becoming equal through the circle, of doing ceremony, which was a way to heal as opposed to continuing insights that took us to a certain understanding but didn't transform it. All those different ways, living by the moon, just all those different endless kinds of ways. And interestingly enough, when I started to really do my deeper shamanic or earth honoring work was also when I discovered the Akashic Records through readings and really felt that there was a light, a love, a cosmic consciousness that lifted me into a space of understanding in a very different way. So I felt those two tracks really important to mutually follow, which were very difficult to keep straight, but I did somehow. And so it kept me going in that way too, that there is another way to tap in to understanding and wisdom and our stories, that I found astrology as the map or the compass, and I found the readings and the Akashic realm as a realm to continue to evolve in all these different ways, that they all just kept speaking and reverberating to each other. And I'm still opening up spaces and learning and being humbled of how little I know and all of that. But I have found that something that really held me through all the work that I did and the limitation of the teachers and the teachings and the shifts that I went through, was that something that held me out of space and time in the this realm, in the multi-realm of my spirit and my soul, was the Akashic realm, and was this offering of where I stood in my individual self as it related to different realms of referring myself to. And that kind of got me back on track in navigation. I kind of laugh, like I can navigate people in all these cosmic realms, and all these different spaces, but put me in a car outside of, a place I understand, and my GPS goes crazy. So I don't drive as well in the on the map of the road map on the earth as I do on the cosmic map, but we all have our limitations. So I don't know how much that helps, but that's where I went. So I was, from Astro Talk, I have an Aries moon, which I think does give me a sense of courage to be a pioneer in a way that I probably shouldn't, but to have a fearless some ways, even though I'm deathly afraid of other things. So that's what I did. And I think it was not well thought out at all. It was very intuitive. And I think it was, kind of meant to do in this lifetime.
Yeah, well, thank Goddess that you have that Aries moon because, just of all your teachings and sharings and gifts that you've shared so far. What I love about you, Susan, and I shared a little bit in the beginning in your intro about just how I was introduced to you and my experience sitting in circle, in the women's circles with 13 moons, which I want to talk about, but how literally just sitting and listening to you speak, how I can feel all of these new neuronal connections and firings happening, which I feel that's part of the medicine. It's opening up these doorways and possibilities of growth just at that level. And that clearly is part of your gift with communication. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah. And there's so much there that you touched on that I want to cover. But I love how you spoke to how loss, curiosity, and the primal body experience really seemed to be what led you and what leads us into these deeper layers of the self and our understanding of the world, particularly with the unseen realms. And two words that come up for me with your story and with so many others that I hear about are courage and trust. That like having that courage and then trusting the process to move forward and literally co-create what it sounds like, as you were speaking. I'm just imagining this spider web growing exponentially. So there is so much medicine that you offer, blending the academic, the tangible, your Capricornness, which I love, with the esoteric and the cosmos. I'm always curious, how do you describe what you do to people when they ask you what you do?
That's my biggest glitch, is the message. I fumble on that quite a bit, and it's a disservice. And I think in this time, the last few years too, with all this social media, thank goodness I just sort of trashed that idea of what's your elevator speech. I tried that once. It was a big mess, but it was because it felt so boxing and, pressured. But one of the ways is creating intentional communities so that we can offer healing and self-awareness and understanding in a context of one another. Because I think that one thing that I really learned when I started to experience falling apart and kind of learning about what we've lost sight of in our world, in our Western world that is so isolated in many ways, is that can be the thing that I think kills us more than anything, or we die from, is isolation and lack of love. And there's a certain way we box in, or our definition of love. And what I found, even so, again, I can't really give you a quick answer, but when I gave myself permission to understand that my boundaries were very clear in my contract with people that I was meant to do work with, but that we had to open up the love field in that space. And when we open up the love field in that space, everything opens up. Because then once we're not in a space of having to defend or protect or be in lack or scarcity, that root chakra confinement, then we're all creative with one another. Then we can heal and we can grieve and we can be inspired. But nothing can happen if we just feel shut down in that space of, kind of survival. And so that's what I feel is so important. And so in the one-on-one, That's really important. But we also have to translate that into the community we want to build. And the community we want to build that we know is the togetherness, the cosmic consciousness is asking us, which is to grow and evolve, is can't do it alone. Can't do anything alone for very long. And so that's one of the other principles of what are really important to me, which is why if I look at my tree and say, what are my branches? The way I usually explain it is that I have an integrative practice. I have a practice of integrative psychotherapy. It's just a languaging people understand a little bit more. And it is a way in which I organize the work, which is soul work. It's funny, I have my advanced degree in social work, but what I really kind of call it soul work, and I really love that. So that allows me to say there's some tools we may work in this if you're comfortable, which is reframing and remapping from a different way that different cultures look at illness and health and look at that model. Also recovery of soul and trauma model. And then we also work with tools that can help us kind of advance ourselves on our game board of evolving in our lives in many different levels. And so that's one facet. And then the other branch that grew was Everyday Medicine Woman, which is the collective model that changes. It's just so funny you say about trusting the process, because I just did a circle. It was on the new moon meditation on Saturday. And so we all pulled cards. And these are a lot of people that have never pulled cards before. I put them out and a little altar, all those things. And at the end, they were just totally got it and were into it. And so the card I got was trust. And I said, yep, that's all I really know when I walk in a space is I trust the process. And I know what that means, and try to get out of my way, meaning my ego and my mind, but then utilize myself in the best way I can to serve the experience. So those are sort of hallmarks. So that's a lot of what I do, is to create and open up spaces that are intentional, that are woven or gridded in a way that allows for everybody to step in so that we all know what we're there to do. And then we can relax into the being that will hold us through a process to move us through, that will have value for us and has an intention for when we move through it, of what we, not outcome based, but process oriented, but will impact us in some way. Because most of the reason, and this as in the healing work that you do in your life, is not a whole lot happens when our life is buttoned up really well and we just move within a box, right? We're not willing when we feel we have a lot to lose, but we risk everything when we feel like we have nothing to lose. And so what I mean by that is when we're shaken up with whether it's an illness or it's a loss in our work or something that really says your life is starting to come at risk, it's falling apart, or we're being asked to move out of our comfort zone in a way that's really frightening because we don't understand how we're going to get there, we start to look for other ways to offer us out of the way that our mind or what we're being asked to or provided for can really offer us. And then we start to take those risks to get to know other parts of ourselves in other ways, like not through the logical mind, but through the intuitive, through the guidance, through the symbols. That's what we learn when we do the Akashic work, right? Is that we have to start to track the symbols of the story, to start to get the real patterns and to start to discover the greater map that's going to organize us and get us on track. So that's when the hero journey really starts, is that we're not on somebody else's map. We start to discover our own, so that's the function that I think we step into as navigators and guides and supports with people. That's my long answer.
I love it. You always give me like 10 million things to, notes. I'm taking notes over here that I want to touch on. But you had mentioned that process of trust and how loss or challenges can kind of really push the envelope of our own edges and understanding. And I was first introduced to you through Dr. Raby at the Raby Institute, but for my mom. And for listeners, you can hear more about my story in the very first episode 0. But my mom, who was struggling with cancer at the time, and she was late stage, and Dr. Raby had mentioned to us, here's this very special lady that I think you should see. And she said that she was just for my mom, that I wasn't allowed to see you. It's so funny. But my mom ended up seeing Susan, and what you were speaking to in terms of the other healing tools that we can bring in as it relates to, dis-ease or illness, and just the amount of comfort and insight and a deeper understanding of the process that my mom was going through. What I saw that blossoming in her, and in this time when it was really the end of her life. And to me, it was that. I'm getting a little teary right now, but to me, that was a miracle. That was a miracle because she, we in this culture in today's, especially in North America, just the culture around death and how there's so much fear around it and lack of understanding and lack of ceremony and reverence for this process. And so I think what you had brought to her was an opening and an understanding that she already had in her heart, and it brought her comfort. So I couldn't never thank you enough for that, Susan.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I remember so vividly when she came in that she was in such a state of grace and such a elder, and was really, and I want to say this gets back into the beauty of and the power of how we're initiated, because when my mother had passed away, before she passed away, because I had worked with the doctors, they told me, forgetting I was her daughter, I was more like the person they used to tell grim news to tell people, that she was not going to recover from her cancer, and no one would tell her. So here I am being her daughter, the only person who would tell her she was not going to get better, and sitting by her bedside and moving through this space. And so while it was really painful and it was very isolating for me at that moment, I had to look death square in the eye and speak about it, not just to people that I was, working with or being called into, but her, and being that, in a way, doula for that. But it really taught me so much around how to do that later with compassion, and to realize, like you say, that in our culture, we won't, even the doctors, the minute they realize they can't do something for someone, they are out of the room. And thank God we have palliative care now, or, hospice, but still they don't do it. And so that space that got opened up for your mom, it was only because of of the grace that I learned through my mother, and really felt it in a more compassionate way because I went through it, and how she was able to relax in to be able to prepare herself because of that process. And, Vanessa, right back to you then, the mystical way, very quickly after we began to do our work together. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was going to you, because I wanted to work integratively, and there were so many limitations on my end and where we live in Midwest, and really going to you. And you ended up providing me with a couple of people that proved to be invaluable for my own, creating a wellness plan for myself. So this is how it works. That's what I meant. It's just spirit and the unseen world and mystery. We just keep working on so many different levels for one another. We are in it together. So it's such a beautiful, to me, it was like such reciprocity for one another. Our story is just so exquisite in that way. And doesn't mean we didn't go through tough things. That's the thing we have to recognize.
Right. And, I want to get into that a little bit more because I know that we have a lot of listeners that might be in that space right now, that might be in, healing crises or just really tough challenges, and seeking hope, but also practices or understandings of healing that they can bring into their lives. So I'm curious, what did you find most helpful for you in your toolkit in, dealing with some of the life challenges and healing crises that you experienced?
Well, what I ultimately, I would have to say one of the big ones was prayer. And that was one of my greatest struggles, was learning what that meant, because it was still, I was raised Jewish and I wasn't connected very deeply as an observer of the religion. And I didn't really understand that word, and I considered that word to be a word that I didn't find appealing, and I thought it was weak, and I really didn't understand it. And the people that I did watch prayed in a way that felt from fear, and it was no judgment. It didn't, meditation and opening up in different spiritual traditions or mystical felt way more interesting and appealing and provocative, in a good way. But what I learned from working with the grandmothers, the elders, is the power of prayer. And the medicine people, like in Peru, once you moved up the ladder, it was your dialogue with the divine, whatever that meant to you, pure source love, where you would bring your concerns or your doubts into a sacred space and release them, and then have that faith, that engagement, that it was out there, but it was going to be reverberated back in some way. It wasn't a one-way street, and it wasn't based on this practice of you had to give something up in order to get, or that you were less than. There was no hierarchy in this. It was just you in dialogue because you were sacred. And this was just a non-ordinary, invisible realm of guidance that could see what you couldn't see and send it back down. But you had to learn to also, so I would say it was prayer, learning the art of sending out the message in a certain way, and then the art of starting to believe that it was coming and how to read between the lines and how to decipher the symbols that were in play. So I think that was a lot of it for me was, that was something that continued to get more refined for me, was that practice and working in, like I say, that sense of how do I engage in the mystical when my human or that three-dimensional realm, I was feeling a lot of opposition or boxed in or didn't get it. I would now, so there were other ways that you learn practices on how to see the world in ways that you can't see through our own eyes, you know? So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but and it was trusting the guidance. And I guess the other thing is your intuition. So really going deeper in that sense of what is my gut wisdom, which is, I know is something you work with very deeply, is that as we feel blocked in, you know, different ways through our constitution, one of the ways we're ultimately not only heal our bodies, but transform. Every time when people always tell me they want to grow spiritually, I say, you got to heal. And if they say, how do I heal? And it's like, you got to grow spiritually. It's like, it is faceted, really true, you know? So it's that sense of, as we heal our bodies, some people do that. And, you know, great. It's where we are in our journey. It's like you get better with the symptoms and then you go on. Thanks very much. I'm done. Great. But if you really want to go deeper, which are people that see us, and again, we go in stages, but it's that gut wisdom. It's that sense of saying, what is my body telling me? And what is my intuition? What is that feeling inside of me telling me, whether it's the physical body or the metaphysical body or something that we're getting, and then starting to honor that is just like someone else may give us guidance or give us a book or send us an email or something like that we know is something greater in that. But inside of us, we have to develop a relationship with ourselves that can trust and honor and value our own opinions. And I think for me, that was the biggest thing I learned when I went through my own diagnosis was I had to find a way. One of the greatest pieces of wisdom I got from one of my practitioners is he said, you have to trust that what's right for you, you know, what's right now. What is right for you is what's right now, and trust in that. Because that's where I got stuck was, well, am I going to be mad at myself 5 years from now, or I'm going to be happy with myself? Like I delayed my own sense of reverence around what I felt that the decisions I had to make that had no rights or wrongs, that I didn't really know right in the moment to navigate myself. And it was what felt right. And he said, what'll be right for you down the road will be right for you then. Don't keep it all as chained and linked together. And that gave me the permission to trust what was right for me right now in a really deep, thoughtful, investigative way. And that's what I did. So my practice is I definitely work on many different things that I work with. So I can find a quiet space in my own being to really hear myself, to bring all the material that I'm culling. I also honestly will ask for guidance before I start looking, and trust that guidance in terms of what comes forward to me, how it feels when I'm reading it, looking into it. And then the other big thing I would say is we have to learn how to live in mystery, and we have to learn to live in a world that is uncertain. And when we can do that, because, you know, we all want that. We want this certainty, but there are no guarantees. I remember that reading this book years ago, and it's my favorite quote, which is, there are no guarantees. From the viewpoint of fear, none are enough. From the viewpoint of love, none are necessary. I was like, wow. That's it. So it's fear or love. And doesn't mean I don't have a lot of fear, because I still do. But I know how to get quiet when I really need to. And I then try to hold that space of what I believe is right for me right now. And that's what I work with today. And you can remind me of that, or I can re-listen to the podcast, because I have to keep remembering, you know, those basics. But that's what I invite people when we're in healing crises. It's more how we can, you know, live in the process rather than make the process be in a space it can't be for us right now.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much there. I think about, in terms of like a specific example, how fear may dictate what we think might be our gut reaction or intuition around something. And so, for example, let's say, since we were talking about cancer and in my mom's experience, she went for chemo, but she went for chemo out of fear. And chemo can be the right answer for somebody. But I do believe it has to come from that place of intuition and knowing that this is the right decision for me, and it's not solely based out of fear. There might be fear there, but it's not coming from that, the decision isn't coming from that place. There's lots of studies around placebo and nocebo effect and all of that I would love to get into in later episodes. But how can somebody begin to discern, especially in those tough moments when there is fear there, but knowing that maybe that decision or what they feel to be true isn't coming from necessarily that place? Does that make sense?
Well, I think you're saying if I'm hearing, how do we quiet that fear? Is that right? Like, how can we quiet the fear?
Yeah.
Or how can we discern what is fear and what is our greater wisdom?
Yeah, because I think sometimes it could be really loud.
It's always loud. It's the louder voice. I think it is very challenging. And I think fear is not all bad. I mean, it's fear. Fear is trying to get our attention around something. It's trying to let us know to be cautious. And sometimes to say, we need to be thoughtful and we need to not be reckless in what we do. So some modulation of fear, right? I think it's the best we can to regard the fear, like to name it and to say, okay, that's fear. That's a voice in my head. Let me write it all out. Let me explore where it's coming from and that there's value in it. It's trying to tell me something and I hear it. And I also hear where it's operating out of a lot of other people's voices. And it's, what else is involved with it, right? It depends for the person. So it's right away being able to name it and being able to separate from it and do those basic breaths or basic, whatever we do to do a little center, like, okay, let me put a pause button for a minute and say, I know it's there. Let me just kind of calm myself down a little bit. But when we're in fight or flight, whatever sounds logical, the mind is honestly just in that situation room with no sound or light coming in, just trying to make options for fear. But when we can calm down the fight or flight and survival for a minute, then our creative mind, we have access to that divine mind. We have access to the critical thinking mind, and the mind that can think outside the box. And then we can use it in a way that can strategize with us and be our friend. So does that make sense too?
Yes.
Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote, what was it, Big Magic or something? When she's going to go into a space, she says, fear, I hear you and I know you're there, but come on this journey with us, or you have to sit back seat. You can't come in the front. You can't hold the map, because once you start holding the map, you're not going to lead us to where we need to go. Wisdom needs to lead us to where we're going to go. Faith needs to lead us, So I think it's also the more we can name the voice and we can understand what fear is trying to tell us, which is people love us and they want us to be around and we want to be around and we want to make decisions that are best for our bodies. And right. So if we can see it from the compassionate way of, fear is trying to tell us to be good to ourselves or to take care, or that our family's worried about us, or that doctors have limitations. But we have to also see that fear has limits too. And if we only listen to fear, we won't be able to see all the out of the box, innovative ways that we can find the right answers for us right now. Not the perfect answer, but the ones we can live with and the ones we think we can thrive from.
I think that those are such good and needed reminders. I feel like we come across that every day in our journey, and that's part of growth and development. And especially when it comes to business and business building, I know that I have found that to be true for myself too. So just such really good reminders. Yeah. Susan, speaking of intuition, you have been so instrumental in my own journey with developing my relationship with my intuition and expanding that and understanding of the cosmos and the teachings, particularly within the Akashic realms. I share a little bit about this in my very first episode, but I'd love to hear from you on your perspective. What are the Akashic Records and how do you work with them? How can they help us in these times?
I've been working with them a really long time, and I don't know, I think about 25 years, something like that. And they're constantly teaching me so much as I do readings for other people and work with myself and teaching and guiding them. In some ways, I look upon it as it's a memory field. It's sort of an embodiment of a memory field that carries with it the essence. So maybe not all the details, or the details can come forward, but the essence of the world story, the essence of our individual story over time. This is a quantum field that is kind of timeless. So it means we can open it up and look at it from chronology of story, but it also has a way of translating that into an understanding that lets us shift the gears in a way that changes the course of something. And so it's a holding that allows everything to dwell within it, but in a non-ordinary or a metaphysical or a nonlinear field. So it's a system of understanding that we look at the biosphere of our life, and then we look at the mental field of our life, which in the Akashic realm or in the Mayan cosmovision talks about it as the noosphere, which is the divine mind, how we hold an understanding of our mental consciousness, that how we think and our belief systems and our values. And then it's all held in this greater field of a divine consciousness. And so it gets very esoteric and difficult to talk about. When I first started this, there was barely an internet. Computers were, those clunky big things that dial-ups, that took forever. But now that we have something called the cloud, it makes it very easy to understand and talk about the records, because it's like we say all of our stuff is on the cloud. How is our information on the cloud? How is it we're able to download it? How does it then become retrievable? And then how do we make use of it, and how we're all connected from it? We were never connected as a globe. I just talked to somebody 2 days ago from Australia. That's outrageous. They did an Akashic reading. It was just crazy.
Awesome.
So it was just this sense of accessibility when we can tune in and become connected to a frequency that has this information. So that's, in a way, the Akashic realm. It's considered to be the holder. It's like Akashic literally translates from Sanskrit as essence in pure form or sky. So when we look at it from the chakra system, the fifth chakra is called the ethers. Like the fourth is the wind, like the elements. Fifth is the ethers. It's that thinner, kind of more purified, rarefied energy between air and energy. And that's where we transmit, because we hear and we speak as transmitters of this higher realm. So it's the gateway up to the sky. But what holds up there then is, I would say, more of the ascended masters. So it's not everyday information. It's the knowledge. So if it holds everything, if it's that holder of like the cloud, then it holds all the traditions, all the elements. It's beyond lineage. It's beyond culture. It's beyond gender. So we keep going up to something that is one. And that is cosmic consciousness. So it's not only universe, but what's the universe driven by? It's by an energy of cosmic awareness. And so the belief is in cosmic consciousness, it's almost like a future energy of understanding. We hope that you and free choice and free will grow. We'll evolve. We'll evolve on this earth as a species to see what is it like to live without scarcity, live without pain, just like we were talking about. If the only way we really grow is through struggle, how the heck do we really not have disease? Because if disease is one of the only ways that we learn from, and we don't take ownership from our learning in a different way, we still have a function for it, right? So it's stepping into this space that's trying to teach us to grow because it loves us. So there's a cosmic consciousness of love. Like I said, opening up the love field. So I look at the Akashic realm as this energy that we need to attune into to remember our divine codes, our sacred compass, the part of our DNA that holds the understanding of who we really are and what we can really source from and how we can direct our lives. And then seeing that we are really one cell in the great one body. And so we have to be one of collaboration with one another. And so it's a beautiful way to get in touch with our higher self. And a place of love and a place of reconciliation. It's a place that through pure source love, we see through why the struggles are there, why we hold these discomforts, and that where we can start is a place of forgiveness and make peace because we know we're whole and we understand the lessons and we understand the grace. It doesn't mean we forgive the act, but we understand it in such a way that it's not informing or creating a side story for us. We can take the understanding and move forward and liberate ourselves and be on to something else more worthy of our time and worthy of us living in a liberated, open way. So I work with it that way. I offer it to people, and some people doesn't resonate. I don't offer it to everybody, but I think if it's going to be helpful, some people have absolutely transformational experiences and only have one reading or two or three, and they really, use it very sparingly when they feel it's appropriate. And other people, that's what they work with, is through the records, and that's how we get the information. But I don't really personally like doing one-off readings because I utilize it in the form of my greater integrative work with people when I collaborate and work with them in partnership. People come in with an expectation, and they come in with a sense that they're just going to listen in, and if they don't like it, they leave. And I get it, but it's not the best use of who I am working with the records. And so I think it's most important that someone comes in to be a collaborator. And that means that we know that we're in a field of approximations, and that we're in it together, and then the information's richer too. And the healing's in the experience of being attuned to the realm more than the information. So that's how I work with it, and that teaching of the records, and that is just really exciting and beautiful because there's no limit to what we learn. And so I'm always learning more by opening up that space together with individuals that feel called to explore.
I really love the point that you brought up about developing a relationship with this information and the process and the records. And I found that to be very true for myself, studying with you and our regular groups and work together, and how expansive that process has been for me on not only a personal level, but literally in all areas of my life. And that really creating that relationship to my records and the Akashic realm has allowed me to tap in even more into my own intuition and trust my physical body. So it's interesting, kind of like, as you're saying, it's kind of a tough topic to really put into words because it can be kind of this esoteric thing, but how in my experience, it has brought me even closer to my humanness, and living in this world. So yeah, has been a huge part of my life. So I have you to thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I love watching, your own capacities grow so much. And the two things that I think are really important when we work with the records as listeners and activators and readers is two things that happen, I think, to really be able to facilitate, which is, again, getting back into our lives, which when you said humanness is vulnerability, because we're very exposed and vulnerable when we're reading. Because we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to guide people somewhere inappropriately. We're on the line to interpret information. And so we really need to surrender into the vulnerability and the awkwardness of that, and deeper in the trust. And then the creative process. I think that it's incredible because the way we interpret is the symbols, what we see, what we feel into, what we hear, what we're, and then put the dots together and put the patterns in to help interpret. So it's another language, but it's not a language, literal language. It's a mystical language. And so translating all of these things, whether it's indigenous work or it's working without the map, in the Akashic, it's all those things. It's like we become a tool that we have to utilize, and then utilize the mind to be able to translate everything that's moving through us. And then individuals having that trust in the process, not just in us, but in the process, because they get engaged in it too, because we'll throw something out there and go, does that make sense to you? And then it forces them to say, no, but yes. It's like, okay, how? And then they start to go, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And then next thing you know it, they've become engaged as translators too. And their lives are changed because even if they only have one reading, something opened up in them to start to see how the different realms are working and talking to us, and how we can start to open up to that because they exist, and how we can attune ourselves to that process. The other thing, though, I want to stress that I know we talk a lot about from my point of view is the sacredness of the records and the preciousness. And I think I really feel they're gridded to only highest good information. And I think that's what separates them out from a lot of other psychic. And I'm not putting down anything because I get a lot of intuitive readings, but I think that it grids and helps protect all of us to say the material that's going to come through is meant for your highest good. And I really trust that because I feel that it's then held to a higher standard that lets me relax more into the process as well. That what I'm moving through, it may be very difficult information, but I trust more deeply that it's for someone's evolution and for their what they need to hear and help them with their healing. So that I think is important too, is this is information, which I again think, even though it's difficult to say eloquently and quickly, I think we have to revere it, that it is something that takes time to explore and to understand, and we need to be patient with it and be patient in encouraging people to understand that the minute we get really facile at it, I think we've lost something. With everything we do in the spirit realm, we are denigrating the depth of where it comes from.
I think that is such an important point, because I was thinking about your analogy and just how good of an analogy the iCloud, the internet is, and how interesting it is that as humans, we created this process that is a bit, sort of a reflection of this more sacred realm of how we're interconnected, through Akashic, and how we literally through technology created iClouds and the internet, and so that we can become interconnected, and how quickly things then happen because of that process. Although obviously, I wouldn't say that the internet necessarily for our best and highest good always. So it's a bit different in that respect. But I'm curious to hear your perspective in these times that feel like there's a lot of rapid change. There is a lot of upheaval, a lot of shadow that's being dug up and shown because of this interconnectedness, through technology and globalization and all of that. How can we begin to, let's say, nourish these more ancient and natural parts of ourselves to help us through these times? And I know that you have a lot of different tools in your toolkit that helps one do that. How are you feeding your wild, so to speak, and nourishing those ancient and natural parts so that you can continue to do the work that you do and to work from a place of love and everything that we've been talking about today?
I think some of it, living in a city, I think you would probably speak better to how to feed your wild and nourish it in terms of the changes that you made that were really important to you to be your best self and to engage with the natural world and keep that part of it alive in you on a regular basis. I think living in an urban setting is a bit more challenging, to say the least. Even when it becomes a problem to find an open space to see the moon, you're in a little bit of trouble here to nourish the self. But I think it's how to be creative in a lot of ways. I'd love to say that I unplug more than I really do in meaningful ways to try to catch a breath and take that time out. I think that, I have all around me, and you know this, Vanessa, but in my home and in my workspace and everything, there's an altar everywhere. Like I live on altars, kind of, like there's like beautiful crystal mandalas and sacred objects and, just all these beautiful pieces that are constantly reminding me of the natural, sacred and cosmovisions of culture and, that just really take care of me, to be honest with you. They do, because I just see the color and the form and I feel it. And so it just keeps me in a space that helps me stay kind of grounded and open. And I would say doing that individual work with people is, while it's draining on one level, it also inspires me to continue to be. And I'm very lucky in the work that I do in that way, because I have to stay connected to those realms in order to be in service to the work that I'm doing, which means it also keeps me in that space. So there's a reverberation that's really great. I think the way I eat is important to me, even though it takes more time to cook myself. I think that feels really good. It's not perfect, but it's clean eating and it's natural as much as I can do it. And I feel slowing down to cook connects me with a loving action, that's more meditative. Mm-hmm. That's really important. I think also staying in touch with perspective about things and what I have to stay connected to in a value and belief system. So it's like how I keep my beliefs and my values in a way that support those philosophies. Where are those philosophies originated from? And they're originated from understandings that keep me centered and keep my heart to a frequency that's open and is in the game and really cares. I think that we've all felt a real depletion of that, given the amount of kind of everyday trauma that we're feeling in edginess and the bandwidth of fear and worry that we're all in. I don't think we have a lot of resources right now, most of us. So I think we've all had to find ways to unplug a little bit from the day-to-day, way that we get triggered. I find, just also being with people that I really love and care about. I think humor really helps. I think creative arts really help. All those things are really important to keep ourselves kind of well-rounded. And it gets back to community. I think it's more and more, it's being with people that we love and being in a place where we can be unedited and be real and laugh and inspire each other and cry together and whatever we need. And ceremony really helps me a lot too. And all the sacred tools that I use to help me kind of explore and understand myself and get the guidance and groundedness that I need. But again, and then periodically, being able to travel a little bit, and whether it's seeing people that I really love, and also to be outside more in higher poignant and potent dosages of beauty.
Oh, Susan, there is so much. There's so many pearls in this. And I know that we can just go back and re-listen and come up with like 10 pages of things that we could take away from it. So thank you so much. I want everybody to hear the best way to contact you, to learn more about you. And you also do lunar forecasts. So tell us all about how people can learn more and hear from you.
Thank you so much. The easiest way, I think, would be either going to my website, which is everydaymedicinewoman.com. And if you want to reach me, you can do that through Susan at everydaymedicinewoman.com. I have a Facebook page of the same name, and I put posts on that, lunar posts and little articles that might be of interest to us and things of that nature, that events that might be coming up, retreats that I might be offering that are not limited. And then certainly people who are local to Chicago or might be coming in for a weekend or want to come in. There's also opportunities locally. Once a month on the new moon, there is a new moon lunar forecast that I offer, which is for the whole month and has the particular themes that are going on. And we go more into detail around how those themes and cycles impact us. And there's a special focus as it relates to women. And that is hosted and curated by my dear friend and sister, Dorothée Royale. And she is the curator for Moon Tent Co. And the actual podcast is called Moonwise. And so if you look on iTunes, you can find it, and then you can subscribe, and there's archives in there too. And even though the month has passed, there's so much information that you might find useful that might even be like little windows into astrology and cycles that you might find helpful. So that's happening. I'm on the Mind, Body, Spirit Summit that you're interviewed as well. You can let the people listening more know. And the interview that we had that will be on there is on women, power, and the moon. And so that goes more into our cyclical nature. And that was really beautiful. So that's an opportunity as well. And then my Instagram, which is @Susan Lipshutz, also has some little tidbits of information on lunar cycles and also just different ways that we can plug into our natural rhythms through visual, through, images, as well as then little information that can be in there as well.
Susan, I'm so excited for everything you're offering. I highly recommend everybody to go check out Moonwise. And just as Susan said, you're going to get so many pearls listening to the episodes that have passed already. I know that I do. And so check out Dorothée's podcast. It's really lovely. And Susan, I kind of feel like the audience wanting an offering from you around altars. I think that'd be so cool. So maybe you'll hear from more people about that. Besides that, Susan, I just feel so much gratitude for you being here and sharing all of this potent and pure medicine information. Thank you so much for your services and walking so beautifully in this world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for hosting me and for appreciating that work and allowing me to have this time together. And it's really, really a beautiful way to share our stories and to hopefully invite other people to go more deeply into believing in themselves and for us to create this beautiful wave of inspiration and empowerment that everyone can be a part of together. We can learn and grow and all stand in the agency of who we are with more grace and love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episodes, please share with a friend and leave us a review. Your feedback means the world to us. I want to hear how you are feeding your wild. Give us a shout out on iTunes or reach me on Instagram @wildlyrooted. See you next time.